The city was a creature of the night, alive with a million blinking lights that painted the darkness in neon colors. Down on the wet streets, the rain had just stopped, leaving the pavement shiny like a black mirror, reflecting all those lights into a blurry, beautiful mess. This was when the city felt most awake, when most people were safe in their homes, but others were just beginning their work. For a young woman named Ayana, the night had taken a very scary turn. She was walking quickly, her heart thumping a nervous rhythm against her ribs. The click of her boots on the wet sidewalk was the only sound she could focus on, trying to block out the world. She was the daughter of a powerful man, a man with many enemies, and she had been told her whole life to be careful, to never let her guard down. Tonight, she had stayed out too late. And now a feeling of being watched crawled up her spine like a cold spider. She turned down a narrower street, a shortcut she suddenly regretted taking. The main lights and sounds of the city felt very far away now. The buildings here were old and quiet. It was then she heard it, the crunch of footsteps behind her that were not there before, footsteps that matched her pace, then quickened. She dared a glance over her shoulder. Two men dressed in dark clothes were following her. Their faces were hard, their eyes locked on her. Fear, cold and sharp, shot through her entire body. Ayana's mind screamed at her to run, but her feet felt stuck to the ground for a terrifying second. Then instinct took over. She clutched her bag tighter and broke into a sprint. Her breath came in ragged gasps, fogging in the cool night air. The footsteps behind her became louder, faster, pounding against the pavement. She could hear their rough voices now, calling out to her to stop. She rounded a corner, hoping to see an open store or a lit window, but the street was deserted. A hand grabbed her arm, yanking her to a sudden, brutal halt. She cried out, but the sound was swallowed by the vast, uncaring city. One of the men twisted her arm behind her back, while the other loomed in front of her, a nasty smile on his face. "Your father," he sneered, "is going to learn a lesson about messing with us." Ayana squeezed her eyes shut, her mind racing, searching for an escape that wasn't there. This was it. This was how it would end. But the night had other plans. The roar of a powerful, sleek black car echoed down the narrow street. It screeched to a halt just a few feet away, its headlights blinding the men for a moment. The doors opened almost silently, and three figures stepped out. The man who led them was named Jin-Soo. He was young, but he carried himself with an authority that made him seem much older. He wore a dark, finely tailored coat, and his face was like a mask of cold stone. He was a leader, the head of a group that was, by all accounts, a rival to Ayana's own father. He had been on his way to a meeting, his mind on business, when he saw the struggle from the end of the street. The men holding Ayana froze, their confidence melting away into fear. They recognized Jin-Soo immediately. "This is not your business," one of them stammered, trying to sound brave but failing miserably. Jin-Soo didn't even look at the man who spoke. His dark, intense eyes were fixed on Ayana. He saw the terror in her wide, beautiful eyes, the way her whole body trembled. He saw a person, not a rival's daughter. He saw an injustice he could not ignore. He gave a single, almost invisible nod to the two men who stood beside him. What happened next was a blur of swift, efficient movement. Jin-Soo's men were well trained. In seconds, the two attackers were on the ground, groaning, their threat completely neutralized. It was over as quickly as it had begun. The street was quiet again, except for the sound of Ayana's shaky breathing. Jin-Soo walked toward her slowly, so as not to scare her further. He stopped a few feet away. Up close, she could see his face more clearly. He had sharp, handsome features, and a mouth that looked like it didn't smile often. But his eyes, which had seemed so cold from a distance, now held a different emotion, concern. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice low and calm, like deep water. Ayana could only shake her head, her words trapped in her throat. She was still trying to understand what had just happened. Her father's greatest rival had just saved her. "Your father would start a war if he knew you were here with me," Jin-Soo said, more to himself than to her. He knew the rules. He knew he should just call her father's men and let them deal with it. But something stopped him. Letting her go back into the night, even to her own family, felt wrong. She was a target now, and her father's world had just proven it was not safe for her. He made a decision that went against all the rules. "You cannot go home. Not yet," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. You will come with me. You will be safe. Ayana was too stunned and too scared to protest. He hadn't asked, he had decided. But the command in his voice was strangely comforting. He was taking control of a situation where she had lost all control. He guided her gently but firmly into the back of his luxurious car. The inside was quiet and warm, smelling of clean leather. It was a world away from the cold, dangerous street. She sank into the soft seat, wrapping her arms around herself. Jin-soo got in beside her, giving a quiet order to his driver. As the car pulled away, Ayana watched the city lights streak past her window, a river of blurry color. She was in a car with the man she had been taught to fear her whole life, and she had never felt safer. The car did not take them to a tall office building or a scary-looking compound. It stopped in front of a tall, modern apartment building, the kind with a silent, gleaming lobby and a doorman who nodded respectfully to Jin-soo. They took a private elevator up to the very top floor. When the doors opened, Ayana stepped into a space that took her breath away. It was not a home filled with clutter and personal things. It was huge and open, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showed the entire sparkling city laid out below them, like a treasure chest of lights. The furniture was minimal and elegant, all clean lines and soft gray colors. It felt like a peaceful sanctuary high above the noisy world. Jin-soo took off his coat and hung it neatly. "This is a safe place," he told her. "No one will find you here. You can have the guest room." He gestured down a hall. He was being polite, but distant. He was her protector, not her friend. Ayana just nodded, feeling very small in the vast, quiet apartment. She found the guest room, which was just as beautiful and impersonal as the rest of the home. She sat on the edge of the large, soft bed, the events of the night finally crashing down on her. The fear, the chase, the rescue. It was all too much. A single hot tear escaped and rolled down her cheek, followed by another. She cried silently for the danger she had been in, for the strange turn her life had taken, and for the confusing kindness of the stern, quiet man in the other room. After a while, there was a soft knock on her door. She quickly wiped her tears away. "Come in," she said, her voice a little shaky. The door opened and Jin-soo stood there, holding a cup of steaming tea. He walked over and placed it on the bedside table for her. He saw the faint tear tracks on her face, but he did not mention them. He just stood there for a moment, looking at her. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was filled with all the unspoken things, their families, their rivalry, this strange situation. "Thank you," Ayana whispered, looking up at him, "for saving me." Jin-soo gave a slow, single nod. His stone-like mask seemed to soften, just a little around the edges. "You should rest," was all he said before he turned and left, closing the door softly behind him. Ayana picked up the warm cup of tea and held it between her hands, the heat seeping into her cold fingers. She looked out the giant window at the endless city. She was a prisoner in a way, but it was the most beautiful prison she could ever imagine, and her jailer was the most confusing and intriguing man she had ever met. The night was quiet, and for the first time in hours, her heart was calm. The game between their families had changed forever, and neither of them knew it yet. The first light of dawn painted the sky in soft shades of pink and orange, slowly chasing the deep blue of night away over the city skyline. Ayana woke up in the strange, silken sheets of the guest bed for a single, blissful moment, forgetting where she was. Then it all came rushing back, the fear, the chase, the calm, commanding voice of Jin-soo. She lay perfectly still, listening to the profound silence of the apartment. It was a different quiet from the one in her own home. Her father's house was silent too, but it was a heavy, watchful silence, filled with the ghosts of arguments and the weight of his business. This silence was peaceful, like the world was holding its breath. She crept out of bed and padded over to the enormous window, pressing her hand against the cool glass. The city below was just beginning to stir, tiny cars like ants starting their day. She was up here, in a cloud, separated from it all. She found Jin-soo already in the kitchen. He was not cooking, but standing by another large window, looking out, a cup of black coffee in his hand. He was dressed simply in a dark sweater and trousers, and without his formal coat, he looked younger, yet somehow more serious, more real. He turned when he heard her, and for a long moment, they just looked at each other, two strangers bound together by danger and circumstance. "There is food in the refrigerator," he said, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. "You can make whatever you like." He did not offer to make her breakfast. It was not his way. He was providing shelter and safety, not service. Ayana, used to a house full of staff, found it oddly refreshing. She rummaged through the nearly spotless kitchen, finding eggs and bread, and set about making a simple meal for herself. The normal, everyday action of cracking eggs into a bowl felt grounding, a tiny piece of her old life in this new, surreal one. The days began to form a strange, new pattern. Jin-soo would leave for parts of the day, attending to the business that gave him his power and his fearsome reputation. Ayana was left alone in the beautiful, empty apartment. At first, she just watched television or looked out the window, feeling the hours stretch out long and lonely. But then she started to explore. She found a small, forgotten stack of sketchbooks and a box of charcoal pencils in a closet, left behind by some previous occupant or maybe never used by Jin-soo. It was like finding a treasure. That afternoon, the silence was broken by the soft, scratching sound of charcoal on paper. She began to draw, first the view from the window, then, as her confidence grew, from memory, the trees in a park she loved, the face of her mother from a faded photograph. When Jin-soo returned that evening, he stopped in the doorway of the living room. Ayana was curled on the vast sofa, completely absorbed in her drawing, a smudge of charcoal on her cheek. She hadn't heard him come in. He stood and watched her for a minute, seeing the concentration on her face, the way her hand moved with sure, quick strokes. He saw the several finished drawings laid out on the coffee table. They were not just simple sketches. They were full of life and emotion. He walked over and picked one up. It was a drawing of the cityscape, but she had drawn it not as a cold collection of buildings, but as a living forest, with light that seemed to dance. Ayana finally noticed him and jumped, a little embarrassed. "I found the supplies. I hope that was okay," she said quickly. Jin-soo looked from the drawing in his hand to her face. "You see it differently," he said, his voice quiet. It was the first real, personal thing he had said to her. That small moment was a crack in the wall between them. The next evening, after a quiet dinner they ate separately, he did not retreat to his office. Instead, he sat in a chair across from her. "What is it like?" he asked. "To make something from nothing?" And so she tried to teach him. She handed him a pencil and a fresh piece of paper. "Don't try to draw the whole thing," she said, her voice gentle. "Just draw what you see. A single line, the curve of a lamp." His large, capable hands that were used to giving orders and, she suspected, to fighting, looked clumsy and awkward holding the delicate pencil. He frowned in concentration, his brow furrowed. He drew a stiff, shaky line. Ayana, without thinking, reached out and placed her hand over his to guide it. The moment her skin touched his, a jolt, warm and electric, passed between them. It was so sudden and so intense that she pulled her hand back as if burned. Jin-soo's eyes snapped up to meet hers. The air in the room grew thick and warm, charged with a feeling that had been quietly growing since the moment he pulled her from that dark street. He slowly put the pencil down. The drawing lesson was over. The following night, a storm rolled over the city. The wind howled outside the great windows, and rain lashed against the glass in great sheets. The world outside was a chaotic, roaring mess, which made the warmth and quiet inside the apartment feel even more like a secret cocoon. They were sitting on the same large sofa, a respectable distance between them, watching the lightning flash over the skyline. They had been talking for hours. He had asked about her art, and she had asked about the book she saw on his shelf. He had confessed in his short, direct way that he liked poetry, the old kind that spoke of mountains and rivers and a simpler life. She told him about her dream to have her own studio, a place filled with light and color, far from the shadow of her father's name. They were no longer the mafia boss's daughter and the rival leader. They were just Ayana and Jin-soo, two lonely people finding a home in each other's words. During a comfortable lull in the conversation, Ayana shifted on the sofa, turning to face him better. Her bare foot, curled beneath her, accidentally brushed against his leg. Another spark, this one even more deliberate. Neither of them moved away. The sound of the storm faded into a distant hum. Jin-soo turned his head and looked at her, his dark eyes searching her face, asking a silent question. Ayana's heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. He lifted his hand, his movements slow and deliberate, as if she were a wild animal he might scare away. He gently brushed a loose curl from her forehead, his fingertips tracing a feather-light path down the side of her face to her jaw. His touch was not what she expected. It was incredibly soft, reverent. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull back, to stop this before it began. But Ayana leaned forward, meeting him halfway. Their lips met in a kiss that started as the softest, most tentative pressure. It was a question and an answer all at once. It was a confession of all the unspoken words of the past days. Then something shifted. The gentleness ignited into something warmer, something deeper and more urgent. Jinsu's hand moved from her jaw to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair as he deepened the kiss. Ayana's hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling the solid, steady beat of his heart beneath her palms, a rhythm that matched her own. The world outside, with its storms and its dangers, ceased to exist. There was only the warmth of his mouth on hers, the feel of his strong arms wrapping around her, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. It was a kiss that held all the loneliness they had ever felt and promised it was over. It was a kiss that tasted of safety, of understanding, and of a fiery new beginning. When they finally parted, breathless, they stayed forehead to forehead, their eyes closed, just feeling the new truth of what they were to each other. No words were needed. The silent apartment was no longer a hiding place. It had become their own secret garden, and something beautiful had just bloomed. The peace of the secret apartment, once a fragile bubble protecting them from the world, could not last forever. The real world, with all its old rivalries and hardened grudges, was always waiting at the door. The end of their sanctuary came not with a loud bang, but with the sharp, insistent buzz of the apartment's intercom. Jinsu, who had been reading quietly while Ayana sketched his profile, stiffened. Only a very small, trusted number of people had access to that direct line. He walked to the panel, his face already settling back into the unreadable mask of the leader he had to be. He pressed the button. Yes. The voice that crackled through the speaker was not one of his men. It was deep, laced with a fury that was cold and sharp as a razor. It was the voice of Ayana's father. I know my daughter is there, Jinsu. You have 5 seconds to put her on, or I burn your entire operation to the ground. Ayana's blood ran cold. The charcoal pencil slipped from her fingers and rolled across the floor, leaving a dusty black mark on the pristine wood. The confrontation, when it came, was not in a dark alley, but in the stark, formal setting of her father's office, a room Ayana had always hated for its coldness. Her father sat behind a massive oak desk, his face a thundercloud. He did not look at Jinsu as a man, but as a problem to be eliminated. He spat words like betrayal and disrespect. He glared at his daughter. I told you about men like him. They take and they take. You'll take every inch until you can't walk. He was using you to get to me. Ayana, who had always been the obedient daughter, felt a new strength solidify inside her, a strength forged in the quiet understanding and gentle touches of the past days. She stepped forward, her voice not a shout, but clear and steady, cutting through her father's anger. You're wrong, she said. He saved me when your world failed to. He protected me when your name made me a target. He gave me a home when yours was a gilded cage. I love him. The words hung in the air, simple and undeniable. Her father was stunned into silence. His plan to scold her back into submission shattered. While Ayana was declaring her truth, Jinsu was undertaking a mission of his own. He went, alone and without his usual guards, to the private study of Ayana's father. It was the most dangerous thing he had ever done, walking into the lion's den unarmed. The bodyguards at the door tensed, but he showed his empty hands. He was admitted. He stood before the older man's desk, not as a rival boss, but as a man. He did not bow, but he showed respect. I did not come to fight, Jinsu stated, his voice calm but firm. I came to ask for your blessing. Ayana's father laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. My blessing? To steal my daughter? Jinsu met his gaze without flinching. I am not stealing her. I am asking to build a life with her. My love for Ayana is more important than any business, any rivalry, any grudge from the past. It is more important than my pride. That is why I'm here asking you." He laid his car keys and his phone on the desk, the symbols of his power and connection. "I will walk away from all of it, right now for her. The question is, will you let your own pride destroy your daughter's chance at happiness?" There was a long, heavy silence in the study. Ayana's father looked at the young man standing before him. He saw no deception, no cunning plan. He saw only a fierce, unwavering truth. He thought of his daughter's defiant eyes, so like her mother's. He had built his empire on fear and strength, but it had cost him his wife's love and was now costing him his daughter's. He saw the simple, devastating choice: cling to his old war and lose her forever, or lay down his weapons and perhaps, one day, have a family again. He let out a long, weary breath, all the fight draining out of him. He gave a single, curt nod. "You will stay away from my business, all of it, and you will keep her safe. If you fail, there will be no place for you to hide." It was not a warm blessing, but it was permission. It was a beginning. Months later, in a sun-drenched valley far from the towering, gloomy city, a new chapter was beginning. Ayana stood in the middle of a bright, airy room. The walls painted a clean white, the wooden floors scarred and beautiful. Canvases leaned against the walls, and jars of brushes sat on every surface. It was her art studio, her dream made real. The light streamed in through a large window that looked out onto a green garden. Jinsu had kept his word. He had walked away from his old life, using his sharp mind to build a new, legitimate business, importing art supplies and rare papers. He was in the corner of the studio now, arranging a new shipment of sketchbooks, his movements peaceful and content. He was no longer a leader of men, but he was the king of this small, happy kingdom they had built together. Their wedding was small, held in that very garden behind the studio. There were no powerful guests or extravagant displays. The only people present were a few loyal friends who had stood by them. Ayana's father was there, standing a little apart, his expression, fuza, a mixture of regret and a dawning, quiet pride. Ayana wore a simple, elegant dress the color of sunshine, and Jinsu looked at her as if she had hung the moon and all the stars. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises not of obedience, but of partnership, of being each other's safe harbor forever. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Jinsu cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was not a kiss of fiery passion like their first, but something deeper, more profound. It was a kiss of promise, of home, of a love that had faced down the past and won. It was a kiss that sealed their forever. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and purple, the small wedding party celebrated with laughter and music. Ayana rested her head on Jinsu's shoulder, his arm wrapped securely around her. She looked around at her studio, her garden, her husband. She thought of the terrifying night that had brought them together, the peaceful days that had made them fall in love, and the brave stand that had secured their future. Their love story was not a simple one. It was born from conflict and nurtured in secret. It was a choice they had made every day, a choice to put each other first above all the noise of the world. They had taken a dangerous, sparking wire, and instead of letting it start a fire, they had carefully woven it into something strong, something beautiful, something that would light their way for the rest of their lives. Their different worlds had collided, and from the pieces, they had built a new one, just for them, a world of light and art, and a peace that was more powerful than any war. If you were moved by Ayana in Jinsu's journey of courage, sacrifice, and a love that conquered all, then you won't want to miss the countless other stories waiting for you. Subscribe to ensure you never miss a new tale of heart-stopping romance, daring adventure, and unforgettable characters. A new world of stories is just a click away.